Okay, so in Module 2, Lesson 1, we talked about how time is continuous, and we can use certain intervals of time to measure it, like seconds and minutes. We're going to continue today to talk a little bit about telling time. I want us to take a look at a problem here. It says, Christine has 12 math problems for homework. It takes her 5 minutes to complete each one. How many problems, or how long, or how many minutes does it take her to do all of them? So I want to show you, we've got the start of a tape diagram right there, okay? And I am going to model this problem a little bit on this tape diagram. So if I look at my problem, Christine has 12 math problems for homework. Well, that's the number of groups she has. She has 12 problems. So I'm going to take and I'm going to divide my tape diagram into 12 equal parts. So I've divided my tape diagram into 12 parts. Now I know that it's going to take her, if I look at my problem, it takes her 5 minutes to complete one of them. So the size of my groups is 5. So each one of these is going to take her 5 more minutes. So if I count by fives 12 times, I should figure out how many minutes in all it took her to do it. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. It takes her 60 minutes to complete all of her math problems. Now, there's a different way that I could demonstrate this math problem, not using a tape diagram like we did in all of our first module. I could use this tape diagram that I've already drawn, and I could use it to help us draw a number line. So you'll notice I made my number line the same length as my tape diagram, okay? I'm going to now divide my number line up into the same number of groups as I have in my tape diagram. Okay, so looking at my tape diagram and my number line, you should see that the lines are in the same spot in both of them, right? Now, what part of the tape diagram do the spaces between my tick marks represent? Those are the units. That's the 5 minutes that were in each group. So the space between each of my tick marks represents the number of minutes it took for each of my problems, or the time, the unit. Okay? Now, I know from yesterday that time does not stop. It was going before Christine started her work, and it's going to keep going after she finishes her math work. So that's why, boys and girls, I have arrows on either side of my number line, okay? Because I know it's not going to stop. Now I could label my number line to help me see how much time goes by. So I'm going to start with a 0 on my first tick mark, okay? And then how many minutes? What was my unit up here? 5. So I'm going to count by 5. I'm going to skip count by 5 and label all of my tick marks down here. So you can see I stopped when I got to 60. So I started at 0, stopped at 60. And I counted by 5s. So the space between 2 tick marks stands for 5 minutes. So how many minutes are from this one to this one? Okay, so from 0 to 10, that's going to be 10 minutes. From 0 to 60, that's going to be 60 minutes. From 15 to 30, that's 15 minutes because I would count 5, 10, 15. I'm counting by 5. So we could use this number line to help me figure out how long it takes Christine to do 4 math problems. Okay, so I'm going to start at 0 because that's when she started. Yes, time was going before, but that's when she started doing her work. And I'm going to count by 5s. How many times? 4 times because we're doing 4 math problems. So 5, 10, 15, 20. And I stop there because that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me count that again so you can see it. I stop right there, okay, because that's 1, 2, 3, 4 math problems that she completed. So it took her 20 minutes to do 4 math problems. So boys and girls, I counted the interval between each of my tick marks to see how much time went by, okay? Your interval is the time that goes between two segments on the number line. So when I was figuring out how long it took her to do 4 problems, I counted the intervals between my 2 tick marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and I end up at 20. Now, if I wanted to figure out how long it took Christine to do 7 math problems, I would count 7 intervals. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I stop there, and I see that I'm at 35. If I wanted to know how long it took Christine to do 9 intervals, I don't have to count by 5s 9 times because I've already counted down here. I just have to count 9 intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I see that I end up at 45 minutes. If I wanted to know how long it took Christina to do 11 math problems, again, I don't have to count by 5s because I did that. I just have to count 11 intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And I see that I'm at 55 minutes. Now, I could take this number line and I could label it a little bit more specific. I could label this with minutes, okay? This is starting at 0 minutes and going to 60 minutes, okay? And I'm showing that time is continuous because I've got my arrows and it went before I started and is going to keep going after I stop. So if I look at my number line now that I've labeled it, I can tell that 60 minutes are labeled on this number line. Now, if I wanted to, I could make this specific about a specific time. So let's say that I was trying to talk about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, 1 o'clock would start here. And I know that 60 minutes after 1 o'clock would be 2 o'clock. So I'm going to label my 2 o'clock right there. And now I could look at this number line and I could use it to help me figure out when I do specific activities, okay? I could figure out, okay, what if we started our Google Meet at 1:10, okay? Is that time between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock? Sure is. So I'm going to put my finger on 1 o'clock to start, and I'm going to move it to right as I skip count intervals until I reach 1:10. So I'm going to start at the 1 o'clock, and I'm going to skip count my intervals until I get to the 10, the 1:10. So there and there. Yep, sure enough, it's right there. What were we counting by? 5s. We were counting by 5s there. So I'm going to put a dot right here. That's called plotting. I'm going to plot the point for reset or for our Google Meet and put an M. Okay. So when I am going to label a spot on my number line, we call that I'm going to plot. Okay. What that means is I'm just going to I'm finding a spot on my number line and I'm putting a point there. Now your point, it just looks like a big period, okay? It's a specific spot on my number line. So I plotted where our Google Meet would be at right at 1:10. Now, what if we were going to end our Google Meet at 1:35? Is 1:35 between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock? Sure is. So let's go and plot 1:35 on our number line. So if I look here, I'm going to count my intervals by 5s until I get to 35. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. So I'm going to plot that point right there, okay? And I'm going to write an E because we ended our Google Meets. Now, what about this? What if you were going to go have a snack at 1:45? Is 1:45 between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock? Sure is. So we could plot that on our number line. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So I can plot my point for my snack. So we can use a number line a lot like a clock that you might see on the wall at school. Probably not the clocks that you see at home, but like the clock you see in the school. And if you remember from second grade, this clock has a specific, and that's called an analog clock. Any clock that's not digital, which your cell phone clocks, your clocks on your Chromebooks, those are all digital. So any clock that might look like this, it's not digital, is called an analog clock. And our number line matches that because it really looks like we just took our clock and we just unrolled it and we rolled it out into a straight line. On both our number lines and our analog clocks, we count by fives. So let's take a look at Mrs. Gillen's really big analog clock here, okay? So just like on our number line, we counted by fives to plot points, to plot minutes. We can do the same thing on our analog clock, okay? So if we look here, we always start at the 12, okay? There's not a 0. Our 12 is our 0, okay? And we're going to count by fives and see where out on the clock we get to 15, okay? So 5, 10, 15. Yep, at that 3, we would be at 15. What if we wanted to get to 45 minutes? We would count by fives until we got to 45. So we go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So 45 minutes is right here on our analog clock. If we wanted to do, let's say, 55 minutes, we count by 55, or we count by 5 so we get to 55. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and we stop right there. That's where the 55-minute mark is on our analog clock. Now, if we were trying to find a specific time, we were telling time on our clock, okay, we could use our analog clock to help us. Let's say we have the time 9:15. Remember, on my analog clock, my little hand is my hour hand. My long finger is my minute hand. So if I wanted to find 9:15, my hour hand is going to come over here by the 9, okay? In my minute hand, I'm going to count by fives until I get to 15. 5, 10, 15. So there is where 9:15 fall on my analog clock. If I wanted to do 3:30, so 3 is my hour, so I'm going to put my hour hand at the 3, and then my 30, I'm going to count by fives until I get to 30. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and I stop. What if I wanted to find 7:50 on my analog clock? So 7 is my hour, so I move my little hour hand to 7 o'clock. And then I'm going to use my minute hand to count by fives until I get to 50. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, and I stop right there. That's where the 50 minutes is. So just like we count by fives on our number line, we also count by fives on our analog clock to find specific times. So remember, we can measure times with seconds and minutes, okay? And then we can even use things like number lines to help us tell time. And we just draw our number line. We have arrows because we know time is continuous, okay? And we can plot points on our number line. And we can count the intervals, the spaces in between, to help us get to where we need to be at. Or we can use our analog clocks. And both our number lines and our analog clocks are going to go by 5-minute intervals because that's what we use on analog clocks. So you're going to go practice telling some time on both digital clocks, analog clocks, and number lines. And then there's an assignment for you to do in part 2. And if you have questions, make sure you reach out to Mr. Rushrai. Thanks.